We will hear argument this morning in Case 24-1287, Learning Resources versus Trump, and the consolidated case.
Congress writes tax laws. Presidents enforce them. This case asks what happens when an emergency law lets a president raise prices on everyday goods without Congress voting at all, and whether the Constitution still draws a line once an emergency is declared. For the companies in this case, the tariffs were not abstract. They change prices overnight. Groceries, school supplies, everyday items people already worry about affording. When tariffs change, those costs don't disappear. They get passed along. The question wasn't whether the president could act fast. It was whether he could act alone. That question reached the Supreme Court in Learning Resources, Incorporated versus Trump. The government argued that emergency conditions justified emergency powers, that under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the president could regulate imports through tariffs. But that claim immediately ran into a problem, because tariffs don't just regulate behavior, they raise money. And for centuries, that power has belonged to Congress.
I just don't understand this argument. It's not an article. It's a congressional power, not a presidential power to tax. And you want to say tariffs are not taxes, but that's exactly what they are. They're generating money from American citizens, revenue.
The government tried to draw a distinction, that these were not taxes, but regulation. That answer did not settle the issue. It sharpened it. If tariffs can be imposed without Congress, simply by declaring an emergency, then what limits remain? What are the limits? Where are they written? That question mattered, because Congress had seen this pattern before. Presidents once relied on a wartime statute called the Trading with the Enemy Act. It was written for World War I, but it did not stay there. Franklin Roosevelt used it during the Great Depression to control gold and private financial transactions. Richard Nixon used it in 1971 to impose wage and price controls and freeze international financial obligations. Eventually, Congress discovered something alarming. National emergencies declared years earlier were still technically in effect. Emergency power had stopped being temporary. That alarmed lawmakers. So Congress stepped in. In 1977, it passed the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, not to expand presidential authority, but to narrow it. IEEPA was designed to replace vague wartime powers with a more limited framework, focused on sanctions, asset freezes, and specific foreign threats. It did not mention tariffs, it did not mention taxes, and it did not include rates, ceilings, or formulas. That silence was deliberate. The statute gave the president tools, but it did not give Congress's core powers away. That narrowness was not accidental. It reflected a constitutional understanding. Tariffs sit at the center of Congress's authority. They shape prices. They affect everyday purchases. They determine who ultimately pays. Allowing them to be imposed by emergency declaration would quietly rewrite the balance of power. This case did not begin as a political fight. It began with companies trying to survive sudden cost increases. But it became a test of something larger. How much lawmaking authority can be unlocked by declaring an emergency, and whether constitutional limits still hold when pressure is high. Tariffs may look like numbers on a shipping invoice, but at their core, they are about power. Who holds it, who delegates it, and where the law draws the line. If this helped you understand how power actually moves, you can subscribe to the channel to follow what comes next. The decision will come later, but the question this case raises will outlast it.